Today I wanted to talk about doing something that you have wanted to do for a long time, but always been too scared to do. And there's been something that I've wanted to do for several years now. Really, I had the idea of it ever since maybe a year or so after I graduated college, kind of right around when I moved to where I live now, when I moved out of my college town. And I had studied music in college, and that was always kind of my, future-oriented goal is, get a music school. I had planned to get a grad school in a bigger city and kind of continue on from there. I made another video a little while back about kind of the end of college for me, and when I had started applying to schools and kind of changed my mind on what I wanted to do. And so this comes kind of shortly after that. I had if you watch that video, I kind of ended with, I had messed up some of my application deadlines for some grad schools, and I kind of decided to give myself some time off as far as that, very, very future-oriented, goal-oriented lifestyle that I'd been living for a while. So, I kind of let that stuff just sit for a while. I didn't know if I wanted to pick it back up again or if I wanted to do something else. I just gave myself some time to kind of think about my life, figure out what I wanted to do. And something else popped up, which was something I'd been into a lot as a kid and kind of let fall away from me, just especially through high school and college, when I kind of really cracked down on music stuff. Is I had always been really into just media and culture from Japan. That was a lot of my interests as a kid. Just kind of all the typical things, just a lot of the video games I played. Manga I read, anime, some movies, literature, just a lot of that stuff I had been interested in, came out of Japan, and I started looking into, is this something that I could learn the language of to actually experience it in its native language, kind of as it was intended to be. And that wasn't something I'd thought about too much before that, and if I had, it was something that just kind of felt out of reach. That's just as common as it is in many countries and many cultures to know more than one language. That was never something that I felt was really possible for me. It just felt like kind of an overwhelming task. But I started to think about it and research it a little bit, and I bought a textbook, just a common, pretty common, Japanese to English textbook. It's called Genki. If you've ever studied Japanese, you probably know that one. And I just started learning it, and I didn't have to get very far. Not that years later, I'm still very far in it either, but I didn't have to get far to realize that this was something that was possible. This was a skill I could learn how to do. And so I just started getting really interested in it, and not with any hard future goals in mind, just kind of a general interest. I started learning that, and then I started thinking about, I'd had at that time some experience teaching, and I started looking up jobs like that. I had really wanted to just in a general sense, I've talked about this in other videos too, find a job that I could apply for in some faraway place, not necessarily out of the country, but just a job somewhere else that kind of got me out of where, where I had grown up and where I lived my whole life, and, just started fresh somewhere else. That was something that I really wanted to do. I started looking up jobs in Japan, of which, there are a lot of programs of teaching English in Japan. And I thought that was, I never been, super interested in specifically teaching English, but, I had had good experiences teaching. I had done, a decent amount of music education at the time. And, that was a field I felt relatively comfortable in. So I just started thinking, well, this could be something I could do. It's in the education fields, which I have some experience and familiarity with. It would get me far away from where I had lived, kind of a very fresh start. Getting set up somewhere in Japan, teaching. And pretty soon that just became what had once been a very music-oriented and within this country-oriented future. I started just thinking about doing that, just teaching in Japan. And I started learning the language. I started kind of getting back into the media I had really liked as a child. Just kind of started learning more about the culture, researching these jobs. And at first it was really exciting because, when you're in the first stage of an interest in anything, everything feels very open. You don't have any baggage tying you down about it. It all just feels very pure and fresh. And so I started just getting excited, learning more about this stuff. And I thought, why don't I try to do this? This is, something pretty different than, what I had been up to this whole time, my whole life so far. But it's not so far out of the realm. It didn't feel so too different from what I thought I could do. So just kind of the possibility of doing this started just feeling more and more real. But I didn't have so much baggage and fear about it, which is what kind of built up over time. So, my kind of tentative goal at that point was I had recently graduated. I was moving out of my college town to just another nearby place, which is where I still live now. So I thought I'd get out of here, find some work, ideally just find some music education work, just kind of live a normal life, live as an adult for a while, just working, studying, researching these jobs, and then, soon enough I would start applying and, hopefully get a job in Japan and go kind of start a whole new life there. And over time, this has been my experience with a lot of things. I have that initial goal that I'm very excited and kind of carefree about. And then the longer I don't actively pursue it, the more fear and baggage starts building up. And I had just a lot of, I guess you could just say, mental health difficulties throughout college, and then kind of continuing on into the next several years. And everything just started to really slow down. I would just kind of fall off interest. I would let months go by without studying or really pursuing this in any way. And pretty soon, the fear started building up about like, what am I even doing? This feels like an impossible dream, even though there's plenty of evidence to the contrary. I could just look at, all of the, many available programs and the thousands and thousands of people that have done this same thing that I had done. So it's not like the world was telling me that this wasn't possible. It was quite the opposite. But just that kind of like personal fear started building up, and it started feeling further and further away. Like I'm never going to get to a point where I feel ready to do this. I'm never going to feel well enough and resilient enough to be able to go and do this thing. And that just kind of got worse and worse. And what went from being a planned relatively short stay, moving into this new place and building up this skill and confidence to go on this kind of new adventure, that just turned into years and years that had gone by, and it just started feeling further and further away. And it wasn't something I ever gave up on. I never said, okay, well, I'm feeling too bad about this. I'm just going to try to do something else. That never happened. I always kind of had it as a future goal, but it went from being something that I thought was possible to something that I thought, this will eventually be possible. Eventually I will feel okay enough to do this, but I don't right now. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that line of thinking, but what comes with that is you have to make some moves to get yourself ready and to make something that you want to feel more comfortable to be that way. And it's just something that I never did. It just kept, this goal just felt like this is kind of a far off future goal. Eventually I'll feel okay to do this, but any progress I made towards that was very, very half-hearted because I was just so scared the whole time, and I never felt any closer to this goal. It just felt like I was pushing it further and further away. It just felt like, this will be maybe in 5 years or whatever, I'll feel okay about this. And then a year would pass and I still thought maybe in 5 years. I never felt like 1 year down, I feel a little bit closer. I just felt like this is still in the future. And I started just feeling very discouraged, very upset with myself for just not making good progress. And the worse I felt about it, the less I wanted to pursue this. So, I could ramble on, much longer about this, and I've already said a lot of the same things several times, but that was just kind of the cycle I was in for years and years. At this point, I've lived here since I first moved with that initial goal. I've lived here for, I think, eight years. And this goal never felt any closer. It was still something I wanted to do, but I didn't feel like I had really made any progress towards it. I never felt any more ready than I did. I felt less ready, if anything, than when I first started being interested in this. All of the years of fear and feeling bad about myself, just like feeling discouraged. It was just a bad cycle. It just built up and up over time. And I started just feeling very unhappy with where I lived, where I was in life, that just built up over years. I thought, I'm not in my early 20s kind of pursuing this new thing anymore. Now I'm in my later 20s. Now I'm 30. Now I'm getting into my 30s. And I just felt worse and worse about it. And I felt just more, my mental health just started getting worse it wasn't a consistent decline over the years. You know, there's been lots of ups and downs, but more recently, in the last maybe a couple years, and I had also had some kind of physical health problems that contributed to this, but I just felt just mentally much worse, very unhappy with where I was in life, with where I lived. I just felt very stuck. I felt like I just need to get out, I need to do something different, but I was not taking appropriate steps to make that happen. And I wanted, I felt very powerless about this. And I just wanted, I don't know, I just kind of felt like I wanted some circumstance to come up and change and kind of propel me into this thing. Which, you know, it doesn't really happen if you're not, if I'm just living in fear this whole time, you know, opportunities aren't going to come up because, you know, I wasn't ready for it, and you know, some part of me didn't even want it because I didn't feel able to do it. So, you know, opportunities weren't going to come up, people weren't going to come up and help me. I was the only one that could help myself, and I didn't feel able to do it. I started just feeling worse and worse over the years, very stuck where I lived, very unhappy with just the years of whatever jobs I've done, you know, just various kind of like entry-level service jobs and all that kind of stuff that felt like this is fine to do for a little bit when I'm younger. And I just felt more and more discouraged, like, well, here I am still doing these same types of things. I'm making no progress. I don't even feel able to do anything. It kind of got to a head earlier this year. It's November now, and I would say, you know, right around the beginning of this year, 2025, it really came to a head. I feel like I really hit kind of rock bottom on how bad I was feeling, how stuck I was feeling here. You know, mental health, very poor. But I did have a little bit of help. You know, I've been with my partner this whole time. This has been a goal of both of ours, a shared goal, you know, since we were together in college, we moved here together. We've had this goal together that I've just been kind of struggling with, and I felt like I've been kind of like holding the team back because I'm the one with all these struggles and hangups about this, but this is a shared goal we're trying to do together. And I'm very thankful that you know, this year my partner finally started to kind of push me in this direction, and kind of took up the job and the responsibility of a lot of the logistical research, a lot of this stuff that I just felt like I was unable to do. You know, I'd done, you know, various small bits of research, but it was never conclusive, you know, finding these job programs and stuff. It was more like, yeah, I can look up these things initially and find these programs and learn a little bit about it, but then it got to be it just got to be too scary and too real if I kind of pursued this any further. So, you know, I would always just kind of stop at this kind of initial stage of research. So, you know, my partner took up that mantle of, she was going to, you know, research these programs and just kind of all of the logistical stuff about it. You know, what are the application dates? What are the deadlines? When are departure dates if you are you get employed in these programs? What documents do you need? What's the application what's the application like? And just kind of all that stuff. And she did a really good job of just planning that stuff all out and just kind of like letting me know the information. And it was that little bit of help that I really needed. And this stuff, it went from feeling like this distant dream that I was never really going to be ready for to it started feeling possible again. It started feeling like 8 years ago when I first started thinking about this. I really just did need just a little bit of help, and I wasn't sure. Not that I wasn't sure how to get it. I knew I could ask for help, and I knew there was plenty of people, and I had plenty of resources that I could kind of turn to about this, but I just didn't feel able to kind of like really ask for help and kind of look into this stuff. But it was provided for me, which I'm very thankful about. And one of the programs opened up. The application opened up in October last month, and I thought, okay, well, I've had all this help with all the logistical stuff that I didn't have to do on my own. Now all I have to do is just actually apply to this thing. And I just feel like just getting rid of some of these initial steps in the way, not getting rid of, these steps were done by somebody else, but kind of having that, what felt like an enormous burden for me, it really wasn't that big of a deal just to kind of figure out, learn the logistics of these programs, but it just felt like this huge task for me for whatever reason I wasn't able to do. Once that step had been kind of already done for me, everything started feeling more possible. And I started the application, my partner was doing it, we were kind of doing it together. And I just started building up some momentum that I felt like I hadn't had momentum in years. And I started, just like, piece by piece. It was a relatively extensive application. There's like a lot of parts of it. I have to find, people to write me letters of recommendation. There's a lot of writing involved. A lot of various documents. I had to get, find buried old, papers I'd had stored in boxes in the closet, and get all these forms filled out. And but I think just having basically having this outline of here's all of the steps I need to at least apply to this, just kind of on one page on the computer, on the application site. And I just started kind of chipping away at it. And the more I did, the more I felt like I could do this. I got the momentum going. I started just feeling less scared about the whole thing. I started feeling more excited about it, which is something I hadn't really felt in a long time. I just felt fear about this for years, and very little excitement. And I started just getting, that ratio just started changing. My fear started going down, my excitement started going up. I felt like I had, if I have a 100%, meter of strong feelings about this topic, it felt like it was completely full of feelings, but it was 95% fear and 5% excitement for years, and that ratio just started changing, and more I just felt excited. I was looking forward to it. I thought I'm really doing this. And by doing this, I mean just taking a step, just taking one step forward and trying for this new path. And I finished the application. I just finished it, completely finished yesterday. It was the final day of the deadline. I submitted it. I had been working on it all month. I had really fallen off making these videos, which is something has been a good outlet for me. I really started cranking these videos out this year. You know, when I felt like kind of at my lowest, I thought I have to make some type of change, and if I feel like I'm not able to make the change that I want, I can make a change. I can kind of shift something, and you know, maybe that will shake things up a little bit, and it did. I started making these videos. You know, I'd had some before. I didn't keep up with it too well. I started, you know, being a lot more on top of this all up until last month, which I kind of fell off on, but it was for a good reason. It was just because, you know, I'd really shifted my focus towards this application and this kind of future-oriented thing. I felt like good about myself because I knew I wanted to get through this application. I wanted to have a lot of time to focus on it. And so in anticipation of that, I really cranked out a ton of videos all at once, and I haven't filmed anything in about a month, maybe more than a month now at this point. I don't know, something like that. But you know, if you've been following this channel at all, you know, I've still had regular uploads. I've tried to upload, and I think I have successfully uploaded 3 days a week for a couple months now, including during this whole application time. Some weeks I even had more than that. I think I had a five video week recently, just because I had so much in the backlog. I had filmed so much ahead of time. I'd scheduled it all out, and I felt really on top of it. I thought, okay, I'm doing this creative thing that's been good for me. I like doing, and I'm doing this job thing. I'm finally doing this thing. You know, I didn't think I'd really be able to do both, and to some degree I wasn't doing them because I wasn't really filming during the time I was in the application, but you know, I had prepared for it pretty well ahead of time. I'd gotten all this backlog done, scheduled it all out. That finally just ended. My last video, I think, was from a week ago. Was uploaded a week ago, and that was the first time in a couple months that I had a gap in this upload schedule. So I feel like I have some momentum going. I feel a lot more on top of it. I'm feeling much better about myself. Just that I'm trying. I'm finally trying something, and you know, nothing's guaranteed. You know, it's just a job application, but it just felt like this huge burden, this kind of insurmountable burden for a long time. That it doesn't feel like that anymore. You know, things feel a lot more possible now, just in general. You know, just possibilities I feel like are opening. Everything feels like it's opening a little more. I just needed to get the ball rolling a little bit, and things have been moving. So, you know, I know I know this channel doesn't really get much traction, but I appreciate my subscribers. If you subscribe to this, you know, this isn't a channel that I share with people that I know in real life, so I feel like any traction I've gotten on this has just been very, very random, just people online finding it, and I really appreciate anyone who's taken the time to even watch, you know, part of the video. I've had very few, but a couple comments on videos that I really appreciate hearing what people say about them. I'm really glad to make connections with people. If you know, find any resonance with the type of things that I'm saying, I appreciate anyone that's subscribed, you know, which to me just says like, hey, you know, even if I'm not keeping up with this channel, I kind of like like the vibe of what's going on. I want to at least kind of put a bookmark in this, be able to find it again, you know, to some level, keep track of this. You know, I've had a couple people do that, which is great. So if you are one of those people that have, you know, kept up with this and kind of followed my ramblings for a little while, I think that's really great. I'm glad to have people like you. And kind of lost my train of thought of where I was going with this, but I guess to say I'm trying to get back on top of making these videos. I was on top for a while, and I want to continue to do this. I had a little bit of a gap while I finished this application, but I want to get back on it. So this video is kind of, you know, in addition to talking about like kind of fear and regret and all of that stuff, also just kind of a summary of my past month while I haven't been making videos. So you know, if you like these, I'm sorry for the gap. I'm trying to be more on top of it and not let those gaps happen too much, and just be regular about these uploads and keep it going. I've got, you know, an ever-growing list of notes. I just write down about video ideas. I've got a lot more stuff I'd like to talk about. So I'm just gonna keep that up. And yeah, I guess that's all